Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Sean. I was sharing in the first service the gratitude that I feel every week when I come and hear this beautiful music. Do you not feel that that's part of our ministry? And I also shared that I took piano lessons for 12 years. I started when I was 4. I grew up in a family of adults, and so I always felt like I should be an adult when I was even 4 years old. So I pestered my mother for like 6 months that I wanted to take piano lessons. And I was the youngest student that this teacher had ever considered taking. And she really didn't want to take me. I think she did it out of sort of a favor to my mother. And what happened was I wanted to play like Sean, but I didn't want to practice. So it became a 12-year battle, which shows the perseverance and the strength that my mother had, that every week she would have to come and find me and drag me inside and set me on the piano bench and stand over me while I supposedly was practicing. Right? You music teachers do not get enough credit. So I was also saying that my music teacher was the most patient, kind, loving person I've ever met. And I said, you know, after having me as a student, she deserved sainthood. But I wanted to play. I wanted to be good like that, but I didn't want to put in the time and the effort. So I always acknowledge that when I see that in someone who has. And the other thing that I shared was that when she finally agreed to let me take piano lessons, I started the week before they were having their yearly recital. So being the first student, it went in order. The last student that had joined, it went in order. So I was the first student to play the little whatever I played. It was basically the notes. And so I walked up in this huge sanctuary with a grand piano, barely could get on the bench, somehow made it up there and did my little solo. And that was my debut as a pianist. And I don't share that I took lessons for 12 years because people always ask, oh, do you play? And I don't. I've learned that you focus on your God-given talent, and that was not my God-given talent. So it took me 12 years to figure that out, and probably a lot of heartache for my mother, but we finally got to that point. So I wanted to start off this morning by asking you all a question and asking you to show your hand. The question is, do you believe in miracles? Wow. So I would expect that in a Unity church, right? Because if you've been around Unity for any time at all, you've heard about many, many miracles that have happened in people's lives. But there was a study done by the Pew Research Forum, and they asked whether people believed in miracles or not, and over 80% of Americans polled said that they believe in miracles. And, you know, as I said, that was the astonishing thing to me, is that we could get 80% of people to agree on anything, but they did. And the question that they asked was kind of interesting. What they asked was, do you agree or disagree that miracles happen today just as they did in ancient times? So the interesting thing is they didn't define what a miracle was, and you know that could be up to interpretation. And then the idea is as in ancient times, because that would have sort of a biblical, religious connotation to it. And the researchers said that no matter what a person's belief system was or religious background was, it didn't matter. That across the board, across many belief systems, many backgrounds, people still believed in miracles. So it made me start to think about, you know, they hadn't defined what a miracle is, so how do we define a miracle? You know, to some of us it might be winning the lottery, or surviving a plane crash, or overcoming an illness. Those are all sort of within the realm of possibility of, you know, as they say in the South, what we could wrap our minds around as things that could happen. But a miracle also could be to heal the sick, walk on water, feed the thousands. So I looked at I'm a word person, I love words, and I always want to figure out what the origin of the word is so that I can really fully understand it. And from the origin of the word miracle comes a couple of different ideas. And the first is it's an event or something that happens that elicits a sense of wonder, a sense of awe. And, think about what are the things in your life where you stand in wonder or you stand in awe. Because that really is a miracle. And then the other piece of that kind of historical meaning of that word is that it is a sign of something greater, something outside of ourselves that is at work that we cannot visibly see or touch. So we live in this world of microcosm and macrocosm. Macrocosm is this world that we can touch with our hands, we can see with our eyes, we can hear with our ears. And a lot of people, their understanding of this world stops there. Miracles are part of that microcosm, that underlying system or world that is not visible, that is not part of this material world. And that's where real miracles lie. And Charles Fillmore said that basically intellectual people, and I'm not putting down any intellectual people, my intellect has gotten me some good places in my life, but it has its limits. But what he said was that intellectual people struggle with the idea of miracles because they think that everything stops at their understanding of the natural law. So to really understand a miracle or to be able to experience, we have to be willing to go beyond that. We have to go into that realm of where we cannot visibly see what's at work, and we can't explain it within what we think are the natural laws. And the truth is that part of that is, as he went on to say, is that faith resides in that underlying substance. That's where our faith draws those events and that deeper understanding where we can experience a miracle. Otherwise, we're very limited, and something could be miraculous right before us, and we don't recognize it. A lot of what goes on in our daily life are really miracles, but because they're so common, we take them for granted. We become very blasé. If you just look out the window now and you look at the beautiful blue sky, or look at the greenery around us, all of life is growing, all of life is changing, all of life is bursting forth for our recognition. And the poet Mary Oliver said that this world does not have to be beautiful in order to function. This world does not have to be beautiful in order to work. So why would this world draw us with its beauty other than to have us stand in awe and recognition of something greater than ourselves? There's been many people who came before us who recognized this truth, that was willing to suspend their disbelief. I was sharing this in the first service. There's a term in literature, it's called willing suspension of disbelief. And a friend of mine explained this to me years ago. He was a PhD in English, one of the brightest people I've ever met. And he had a group of friends. One was a doctor, one was an attorney, and one was an animal vet. And their favorite pastime was to go to professional wrestling. And these guys were very intelligent. And I remember walking in one time, and they had the TV on, and the wrestlers were dressed up in their garb, and talking trash and doing all this stuff. And I just stood, and I was like, I don't get it. And he said, you have to be willing to suspend your disbelief. Look past the appearance to know that there's something greater there. And that's true of all of life, is that we have to be willing to look past just the everyday appearance and know that something so much greater is at work. So Aldous Huxley, the great philosopher, he had studied all of the different traditions of the world, and he came up with 3 basic principles that he found throughout all of those teachings. The first one is that underlying the changing reality that we live in, this world of change, is an unchanging eternal reality, which we call God. It's been called cosmic consciousness. It's been called Jehovah. It's been called higher power. There's many names for it. But the idea is that what we experience in this world is only the very top layer. And so underneath that is an eternal reality that existed before we came into the world and will exist after we leave this world. The second principle was that that same reality exists within us. That's our true nature. So Miss Lori had the children this morning, and they all had their Halloween costumes on and their mask, and some of them were pretty scary. I know Bob was pretty scared at one point. I had to calm him down. But she talked about, those are just masks. And we get caught up in the personality. We get caught up in how we present ourselves in the world or how other people present themselves in the world. And it's interesting because the word personality comes from a Greek word persona, which meant mask. It was used by the actors at that time in the plays, and they put on masks to play different characters. So beneath that personality is our divine nature. It's that same nature that came from that creative power, that eternal, unchanging reality. And then the third principle that he found is that the purpose of this life is to fully experience that power, fully understand that power. And that's been the teachings of all the great mystics of forever. Charles Fillmore would sit in the silence for an hour every night, just so that he had that relationship or that experience of that divine reality. And I would add one other onto Aldous Huxley's idea of eternal reality. That reality resides within us, and we are here on this earth to experience that reality. I would add, we are here to express that reality. We are here to contribute to the world that we live in. And I was sharing that there's a Sanskrit word, loka samgraha, and it means world community or world gathering. And the idea behind that is that we live in God's community. And so how do we choose to show up for that community and for those around us? And the truth is that's our purpose. We're here as individualized expressions of God. There's a famous quote, and some of you have probably heard it. It's interesting because no one quite knows who said it. So some of the best things have been said by Anonymous. I say, if Anonymous ever writes a book, I'm going to buy it because there's really some good stuff in there. But what Anonymous said was that what lies before us and what lies behind us is a small matter to what lies within us. And when we bring what is within us out, a miracle happens. So the true miracles of this world is within us. And we're called to bring that forth, to stand in that knowing that we are children of God, we are individualized expressions of God, and choose how we want to express that in the world. So there's a quote I want to read you. It's one of my favorite quotes, and it's from Emerson, and it's along this same line. He's talking about the idea that we have this personality self, and then we have that which wants to express through us. He says, "A man is the facade of a temple wherein all wisdom and all good abide. What we commonly call man as an individual or an ego, the eating, drinking man, does not, as we know him, represent himself, but misrepresents himself. Him we do not respect, but the soul whose organ he is, if he would let it appear through his action, would make our knees bend. When it breathes through our intellect, it is genius. When it breathes through our will, it is virtue. When it flows through our affection, it is love. And the blindness of the intellect begins when it would be something of itself. All reform aims in some one particular way to let the soul have its way through us. So when it breathes through our intellect, it is genius. When it breathes through our will, it is virtue. And when it flows through our affection, it is love. There's an ancient, it's one of the oldest teachings in the world, and there's a line in there, it's from the Vedas, if some of you are familiar with that. And there's a line in there that I've always loved, and it says, do not let the intellect obscure your true nature. So our intellect tells us who we are. We're this limited body and this limited expression, going through life, in whatever capacity that we are going through. And the reality is that that's not our true nature. Our true nature is that which flows through us. It is what we express when we get out of the way of God and allow God to express through us. So I want to ask you another question, and you can show your hands if you want to, or not. Do you believe you're a miracle? Okay. I love being in a Unity church, because first of all, you get responses, and then you get people who really get what you're asking. So the truth is that we are each miracles. If you think about even just the human body is the greatest engineering feat known to mankind. The greatest inventions of man have not even come close to the physical body or the mind, the consciousness that we have. If you think about all the systems of the body and how they work together, and just the fact that we came into this life, that's a biological miracle. That, these cells came together, the chromosomes came together. You had what you needed for 9 months. You're expressing as a totally unique person. That's a miracle. The world that we live in supports us with everything that we need. All of the food that we need, all of the air that we need, all of the things that we need to survive. And the durability of the human body is a wonder. So that's one of the miracles that we sometimes take for granted. The other one is the creativity of the human mind. If you think about this, if you tried to listen to all of the music that has ever been created in the world, you could never do it in a lifetime. Same is true if you even went to every museum in the world to look at every piece of art. And those are only the pieces of art that made it into a museum. Same is true of plays and movies and books. It's astonishing to me when I go into a bookstore or a library and I see the number of books that have been written. So we have that miracle of creativity. We've been given this incredible ability to solve issues, to create solutions, to bring forth God's expression. And then another great miracle that we've been given is the miracle of love. If you think about the astonishing ability to love, and I'm not talking about the Hallmark channel kind of love, but I'm talking about that love that's not manufactured, that flows through us in kindness and connection and a willingness to help. I often think of first responders, people who put their own lives in danger in order to help someone else. And that comes from a knowing that we are all connected, that we are all God's children. Because you can't explain that, to me anyway, in any other way. And so that type of expression can come even through strangers. A couple of days ago, I was standing in line to get a drink, and this woman just came up and stood next to me, and we had one of the most heart-opening conversations while we waited for our drink. And then she wandered away, and I was getting my things and getting ready to walk out, and she came over, looked me straight in the eye, and she said, "It was so wonderful to talk to you today." And I thought, I've never seen her before, and I will probably never see her again. But we both touched each other. And that's the power of love. That's the power that we've been given. So I want to share something, and I'm going to tell you it's a little bit long. I've cut it, and it's still a little bit long, but hopefully you'll get the feeling that comes through. And I want to give you a little bit of background on it and why it's been so meaningful in my life. So most of us have certain dates in our lifetime that we know exactly where we were at that time, and we know exactly what we were doing. And one of those dates for me was October 4th, 1985. I was second year of law school, and I was getting ready to prepare to present an appellate brief to 3 judges. And I got a phone call, and it was from a woman I'd never met before who worked with a dear friend of mine, someone that I was probably the closest to in my whole life. I had known him since I was 5 years old, and he had died suddenly. And 4 weeks after that, my father was diagnosed with leukemia, and 2 weeks after that, my mother had a stroke and became debilitated. So I was at this point of not knowing where to turn. And a few years before that, my oldest sister, had died on my 21st birthday after a very long battle with cancer. And that was when I believed in God, but my faith in God was not strong. My trust in God was not strong because I prayed to God so hard, the hardest I've ever prayed to God, to help her. And that was when my understanding of healing and transformation was very limited. So I thought that meant she would be healed and moved on, and that was not the case. So during this time, it was amazing that total strangers that I had never met before just came out of nowhere and supported me and guided me and gave me exactly what I needed for that moment. You know, they say that you can either fall under the weight of something like that, or you can start to rise above it. And they would just carry me far enough that I could make it to the next step, and then somebody else would show up. So what I'm going to read you was something that was read to me by a total stranger when I was at a really low point. And it's a reading from Og Mandino. Some of you may be familiar with him. I want to give you a little bit of his history because it's pretty interesting. But he was a writer and a speaker. His books have sold over 50 million copies. They've been translated into 25 languages. He wrote a book called The Greatest Miracle in the World. I think he wrote a book, The Greatest Salesman in the World. But Og Mandino, in his young life, was a World War II pilot and bombardier. And he flew 30 missions over Germany during World War II. And he flew with a pilot that you might recognize his name. At that time, he went by James Stewart, but he later became known as Jimmy Stewart. And after Og Mandino came out of the war, he had a hard time adjusting to civilian life, as is often the case. And he struggled. He became an insurance salesman, was fairly successful in his personal life, but he was struggling with alcoholism, he was struggling with emotional issues, and he was contemplating suicide. He had decided that he was going to take his own life. And so something directed his steps into a library, and he went to a shelf and he just started pulling books off the shelf. And what he was pulling off the shelf were books on success and motivation, and it sort of sparked something in him. And he started doing that. He would travel on business, he'd go to a library and he'd pull out books. And he came across this book by a man named W. Clement Stone. It was called The Success of the Positive Mental Attitude. And W. Clement Stone was a mentee of Napoleon Hill, who wrote Think and Grow Rich. And he actually was the head of his foundation for 40 years. But this book transformed Og Mandino's life, and he began writing and speaking about that transformation. So I want to share this with you, and hopefully it's meaningful to you as well. It's called Memorandum from God. So it's from God to you. Let me share with you again the secret you heard at your birth and forgot. You are my greatest miracle. Let us take an inventory. Let us first call a roll of your gifts. Can you see? Does the sun rise and fall with your witness? You can see, and the 100 million receptors I have placed in your eyes enable you to enjoy the magic of a leaf, a snowflake, a child, a rose, a star, and the look of love. Count one blessing. Can you hear? Can a baby laugh or cry without your attention? You can hear, and the 24,000 fibers I have built in each of your ears vibrate to the wind in the trees, the tides on the rocks, the majesty of an opera, a robin song, children at play, and the words, I love you. Count another blessing. Can you speak? You can speak, as no other of my creatures can. And your words can calm the angry, uplift the despondent, goad the quitter, cheer the unhappy, and warm the lonely. And say, I love you. Count another blessing. Are you loved and loving? Yes, for now I will tell you love's secret, that to receive love, it must be given with no thought of its return. To love for fulfillment, satisfaction, or pride is no love. And even should love not be returned, it is not lost, because it will flow back to you and soften and purify your heart. Count another blessing. Count it twice. Can you think for yourself? Your brain is the most complex structure in the universe. Within its 3 pounds are 13 billion nerve cells, more than 3 times as many cells as there are people on our earth, to help you file away every perception, every sound, every taste, every smell that you've experienced since the day of your birth. And to assist your brain in the control of your body, I've dispersed throughout your form 4 million pain-sensitive structures, 500,000 touch detectors, and more than 200,000 temperature detectors. No nation's gold is better protected than you. Know then the first secret to happiness and success is to count your blessings and know that you are already my greatest creation. Where is the limitation that you once claimed? They existed only in your mind. And the second law is like the first. Proclaim your rarity. Consider a painting by Rembrandt, a bronze by Degas, or a violin by Stradivarius, or a play by Shakespeare. They have great value for 2 reasons. Their creators were masters, and they are few in number. Yet there are more than one of each of these. On that reasoning alone, you are the most valuable treasure on the face of the earth, for you know who created you, and there is only one of you. You are the rarest thing in the world. Of the more than 400 million cells, only one of you survived. You alone persevered and found the other single cell. And these 2 cells united in a miracle, each containing 23 chromosomes, and within each chromosome, hundreds of genes, which would govern every characteristic about you, from the color of your eyes to the charm of your manner to the size of your brain. So who did I bring forth? You, one of a kind, rarest of the rare, a priceless treasure, possessed of qualities in mind and speech and movement beyond any other. So take counsel. No longer hide your rarity in the dark. Bring it forth. Show the world. Be yourself. This then is the second law. Proclaim your rarity. And now you have received 2 laws. Count your blessings. Proclaim your rarity. Now I give you the laws of success in every venture. The law is simple. Anyone who asks you to go 1 mile with them, go with him too. This is the third law, the secret that will produce riches and acclaim beyond all others. Go another mile. The only certain means of success is to render more and better service than is expected of you. You cannot command success, but you can deserve it. And now you know the great secret necessary in order to merit its rare reward. Go another mile. You are my greatest miracle. You are the greatest miracle in the world. And now the laws of happiness and success are three. Count your blessings, proclaim your rarity, go another mile. You are a free manifestation of no force but mine, and I gave you the greatest power of all, the power to choose. I gave you complete control over your destiny. I told you to determine for yourself your own nature in accordance with your own free will. So choose to love rather than hate, choose to create rather than destroy, choose to persevere rather than quit, choose to heal rather than wound, choose to pray rather than curse. You are capable of great wonders. Your potential is unlimited. So remember then the four laws of happiness and success. Count your blessings, proclaim your rarity, go another mile, use wisely your power of choice. And there's one more to fulfill the other four. Do all things with love. Love for yourself, love for all others, and love for me. So this day you have been notified. You are the greatest miracle in the world. And so as I look out at each one of you, I see the miracle of God within you. And I thank you for this time. God bless.